Hi and welcome to Katie's Corner in Space. I'm Katie and today I'll be going over Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 Episode 5, Spock Amok. The opening sequence has Spock having a bad dream. His concerns that his human side make him less than suitable for T'Pring manifests himself in this dream, in which she calls for Caliphie, and he must fight himself, Vulcan against human. The Vulcan side kicks his human rear, and he wakes up checking his ears. On the Enterprise, it's at Starbase 1, undergoing repairs after the last encounter with the Gorn. Starbase 1 itself is newly repaired after the Klingon War, and the crew all have plans for shore leave. Pike with diplomatic matters and Spock with personal matters, as T'Pring is there for a visit. During the visit, T'Pring is critical of Spock's room, and he assures her he is redecorating. The small talk continues with her work of rehabilitating Vulcan criminals. Not really what I expected as her career, but she seems to be good at it, she says. She has a talent. Her assistant is also there. T'Pring explains that the reason she brought her assistant is so that she would be free to spend time with Spock, something which was interrupted during their last visit as he was busy. He assures her that he will make time between his duties for her. April has joined Pike, Spock, and Uhura as they prepare for a meeting with prospective Federation members, the Rongovians. They are an interesting species who, despite having been rather confrontational during earlier negotiations with the Tellarites, seem more than friendly once introduced to Pike. When they meet Spock, they question how a group with so many differences get along. Pike says simply, they vote, and then the group begins negotiations. In sickbay, Chapel and Ortegas wait for M'Benga to finish up before they depart for some much-deserved shore leave. They all have their own plans. Chapel will be meeting up with Dever, a friend with benefits, and Ortegas is prepared to be the friend to get her out of a sticky situation if necessary. M'Benga is fly fishing and is dressed for the occasion until the transporter room where La'an and Una are checking people off the ship. This is when things get interesting, as M'Benga lets slip Una's nickname, Where Fun Goes to Die. Oops. Now, the negotiations, having started early, caused Spock to be late for dinner with T'Pring that evening. Their visit is not starting well. T'Pring is obviously displeased with Spock's inability to cut out time for her and actually show up on time. Now, this opening, it's fantastic. It sets up the main stories for the episode really, really well. The first story is Chapel and her need to avoid any serious entanglements. The second story would be Spock and T'Pring seeming to be just out of sync. The third story is the entry of a new member of the Federation. And number 4 is, of course, La'an and Una attempting to be fun. As Una and La'an chat about her newly discovered nickname and how unfun she is, an airlock is being tampered with, and the two run off, Una to assist La'an as they check on the security breach. It's 2 crewmen in AV suits. On Starbase 1, Chapel has up and left her friend when he asks where their relationship is going. She's uneasy to say the least. I believe the answer to his question in the relationship and where it's going is away. It's then Chapel has a seat with Spock and quickly gives Spock relationship advice. It's good advice about keeping T'Pring first, above duty, and he admits his humanity concerns him. With some shared stories about pets, he thanks her for the advice and leaves. He and T'Pring decide to undergo a tradition involving the sharing of katras. It will allow them to better understand each other. But of course, things go horribly wrong, or hilariously wrong, depending on your point of view. At any rate, a full-on body switch happens. April goes to see Pike, and the Rongovians are pulling out of the discussion. It's a surprise, but they will speak with Spock, who is currently trying to switch minds back with T'Pring, unsuccessfully. After revealing to Pike who he is, or rather where he is, T'Pring in Spock's body agrees to join negotiations with the Rongovians in Spock's body. Now, there's some great lines of confusion here where T'Pring, aka Spock, and Spock, aka T'Pring, are saying I mean he, I mean she, can't talk, can't come. It's pretty funny. Spock doesn't want to put T'Pring through the meeting, but she sees it as a chance to understand each other better, and so she goes with Pike. Back on the ship, Una and La'an are interrogating the crewmen who were trying to sneak out. Turns out they were attempting to complete Enterprise bingo, something neither Una or La'an have ever heard of, but Ortega's referred to on episode 2 with Uhura, which allowed Uhura to complete the Get Hazed square. In the interrogation, the styles of the two are just hilarious. In separate rooms, they're each talking to one crewman, with La'an playing bad cop and Una being as friendly as possible, good cop. The editor sliced this together really well. It was quite funny. The contrast was great. Meanwhile, back in Spock's quarters, Spock is speaking with K'Teel, the assistant, who has located the wanted criminal Barjan, and reminds Spock of T'Pring's duty. It is one her assistant believes only T'Pring can achieve, and so Spock takes it upon himself to fill her shoes. Una and La'an discover what Enterprise bingo is. La'an confiscated the list from a crewman under the guise of a routine inspection, and she proposes they attempt to play to better understand it and the crew. So they begin to check off the list. Gum in the transporter, will its flavor come back? Whose request can be filled the fastest in the turbo lift? And of course a shootout at the OK Corral type thing with phasers. Of course, only Una got shot. Back on the starbase, Chapel and Ortegas are chatting about Chapel's latest breakup when they see T'Pring approaching, looking determined. Ortegas warns Chapel not to get into a fight with a Vulcan. Ortegas warns her specifically to avoid the Litvas. She's very serious. She has the scars. After Ortegas leaves them be, Chapel is soon laughing about the switch after Spock informs her of the situation, and Spock needs her assistance to switch back, as he doesn't think he can do T'Pring's job. Spock is concerned this whole situation is turning into hijinks. Clearly he's not been paying attention. This was hijinks about 10 seconds after they got stuck. Back on the ship, Una and La'an are not really feeling the thrill of breaking the rules, which is what the bingo game is all about, because they make the rules. They need to try something else. Back in the negotiations, once again the Rangovians seem to have switched personalities. Not angry, not amicable, they are utterly formal as they speak to Spock, but his answers are not satisfactory to them. Pike speaks up then on Spock's behalf, not only attempting to demonstrate to the aliens the Federation's ability to understand other cultures, but to respect the sacrifice an individual in Starfleet makes to carry on its ideals. This, of course, is also for the benefit of T'Pring, so she can see that those around Spock also understand the sacrifice he makes, and the sometimes difficult choices he must make between his home and his duty, and that he exemplifies what Starfleet stands for. Surprisingly, the Rangovians were not offended by Pike's interruption, and finished the session with a request for concluding arguments later. In another part of the starbase, M'Benga is fishing near the lake T'Pring's fugitive is sitting near, playing what appears to be a game of 3D chess. Chapel has accompanied Spock to confront the fugitive and convince him to come in for rehabilitation, but he won't, and his excuse is Chapel's presence. As he insults Chapel for her humanity, Spock is visibly upset and punches Barjan, knocking him out. T'Pring has her fugitive. Back on the ship, M'Benga is excited to do a Katra transfer. Once he applied the ground Nuvian sea urchins, they are ready to begin. Phlox would be so proud, I think.
I thought it best to keep you sedated while the osmotic eel cauterized your wound. Thanks.
With some precisely tuned electrical shocks, the Katras are forced to seek out more comfortable housing, and Spock and T'Pring are safely back in their own bodies. As Spock thanks Chapel for all of her assistance, she gives him one more piece of advice: to be honest with himself. So he is, and he admits he's worried to T'Pring. He's always had to prove he was Vulcan enough, and in Starfleet he is who he is, and is accepted. T'Pring respects his dedication to duty, but was more worried he thought of her as a duty as well. In the end, they discover they both want to be together. It isn't duty for Spock, and T'Pring is accepting of exactly who he is. Back at the negotiations table, Pike decides to take a different tack, an exceedingly honest one, doing his best to come at them with their own points of view. You see, he'd taken in each of the aliens' reactions to whom they spoke to, but also the reaction to his utter disregard for protocol when it came to defending Spock. He came to the conclusion that the Rangovians don't exactly copy those around them, but attempt to find a way to get others to see things from a different perspective, most importantly theirs, which Pike did, eventually, and they joined the Federation of Planets, flying the flag high as they spread the solar sails of their ship and fly around the starbase, one of their culture's traditions, and a beautiful one the people now at the starbase appreciate. On the saucer section of the Enterprise, Una and La'an are completing the last square of bingo, signing the Scorch, the oldest unrepaired section of the hull, and they get an amazing view of the ship's sails while laughing. They have achieved fun. After making up, Spock and T'Pring lie in bed, and she admits she's enjoyed being Spock for the day. Spock admits he punched the fugitive. T'Pring thinks that was the logical action to take. Back with Ortegas and Chapel, Chapel admits that she had to tell Dever he was boring, and Ortegas tells her she should try more honesty next time. But Chapel says that kind of honesty means things get serious, and that would only happen with the right guy. She seems like she's going to say more, but cuts herself off. I have to mention the fun throwback fashion choice for Pike's dress uniform. Can you imagine? If it weren't for lighting and film issues back in the 60s with the fabrics that Kirk had for his dress uniform, that green would be standard rather than the mustard yellow we have all grown to love. Now, a gold star moment for me is when La'an refers to her childhood as to why she doesn't care much about acting childish. This admission makes the scene of them laughing at the end on the saucer section that much better, because if anyone deserves to find their way to some joy, it would have to be La'an. I think if there is an overall message in this week's episode, it would have to be the importance of truth and what can happen once it's brought out into the open. This episode, just like the last four, is proven to be really a standout episode in the universe of Star Trek. Once again, the actors have different stories, little layers of themselves revealed. Even though this episode is essentially downtime and no big adventures are happening, it was still fun to follow La'an and Una as they broke some rules, trying to figure out the relationship and exactly how it works between Spock and T'Pring. It's challenging when you know how the ending is going to be, but figuring out the nuances of a Vulcan relationship is still new information. And once again, Pike was able to use his brains, because he's a genius, and figure out what it is the aliens truly wanted, truly needed. He studied their actions, their reactions, and came to the proper conclusion, even though it scared April for about 5 seconds there. As far as big standout moments today, I'm going to have to just go with Pike because he was able to come to that conclusion. Many of the other characters did something interesting, and Vega's hat, Ortega's being the wingman that you can count on, Chapel revealing that she's just not ready for a serious relationship, not with the wrong guy, and everybody just sort of getting on with their lives during downtime. It was a good episode. It wasn't an overly thrilling episode, but it was a good episode, and it gave us a little downtime considering the last 4 episodes have been nonstop. Oh my gosh, what have they gotten themselves into this time? If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget that you can like and subscribe below. Always feel free to comment. And of course, try out this video, and I will see you next week. Bye.